Hi everyone, how's it going? Welcome to another video. Now my last couple of videos have been pertaining to UFC events, and well, surprisingly they were pretty popular. A lot of people watched them, especially the first one I did, Francis Ngannou versus Stipe Miocic. And I got a pretty good response on that, better than I thought I would get. So kind of decided I'd do another discussion, another talk on an upcoming MMA event. More specifically, this is going to be the upcoming Bellator events, the Bellator heavyweight tournament that they've been having. And I want to talk about that. That's what I want to discuss today. Not really any fight in particular, but this is a whole tournament that is going to be taking place. And the next one, I believe, or one of them coming up pretty soon, rather, is going to be Frank Mir against Fedor Emelianenko. And I believe that's going to take place in Chicago at the Allstate Arena, if I'm not mistaken. But to me, that's a pretty interesting matchup. Now, Fedor is in this Bellator tournament, and, for those who know a lot about Fedor, familiar with him, they know, the track record he had in MMA when he was in Pride, that he was beating everybody. Fedor is one of my all-time favorite fighters, especially when he was, going through everybody, just beating everyone. And another one of my favorite fighters is actually Dan Henderson. And Dan Henderson actually knocked out Fedor. And I believe that was in Strikeforce. And also another one of my favorite fighters is Chael Sonnen. And he's also in this Bellator tournament. So yeah, Fedor, Chael Sonnen, Dan Henderson, my all-time favorite fighters. Two of them are in this Bellator tournament. So it'd be interesting to see what happens here. If Fedor is able to beat Frank Mir in their coming match, then Fedor will face Chael Sonnen, or Frank Mir will face Chael Sonnen. Whoever wins will be facing Chael. And Chael, as you know, just defeated Rampage. And I'll be honest, Chael was the one that I wanted to win, but I'll be honest, I didn't think he would win. I guess I just kind of bought the hype of, Rampage is 260 pounds. Chael doesn't stand a chance. Rampage is just too powerful. But, Chael Sonnen has always stated that he believes that size tends to be kind of a overrated thing. That the bigger guy kind of gives up speed and agility, cardio conditioning. The smaller guy can be more maneuverable and could last longer with better cardio conditioning. If the guy really is big, then he's really got to have some good cardio conditioning to accommodate that extra weight. But yeah, it should be, an interesting matchup if Chael faces either Fedor or Frank Mir. I mean, either one of those matchups, definitely kind of an interesting fight. You know what I mean? Either one of those matchups would be interesting. But Chael's really been kind of on a roll lately. One of the reasons why he is like my favorite fighter is he could really overcome adversity like no one else. I mean, he lost that match to Tito Ortiz. That should have been a do-over. If ever there was a fight that you're kind of like, okay, you know what, this needs to be a do-over. Let's just get right back in this cage. Let's do the thing over. I honestly felt that needed to be a do-over. But, doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So, they couldn't do it over. But, Chael, so everyone was kind of like, well, Chael's definitely showing a lot of ring rust and very rusty. He's probably not that good anymore. But, Chael did prove him wrong. He did prove what he always says, that, sometimes the guy who wins is the better guy that night. And Chael definitely proved that. when he fought Vanderlei Silva. And that was a match I've been wanting to see for a while, because you've got Chael, as charismatic as he is, best mic skills in the history of MMA. I love what he brought to it, because MMA and the UFC definitely needed that kind of thing, right? I mean, definitely needed someone with really good mic skills like a Jericho or a Ric Flair type guy to really make things more interesting in MMA. And Chael did that. Was in desperate need. MMA was in desperate need of that, because Chael, was pretty, at one point in time, was pretty much like the kind of guy that never said anything. I didn't even have an opinion of him until his Anderson Silva fight, essentially. Although he did beat Nate Marquardt before that, and that was impressive. That at that point, that might have been his most impressive win, when he beat Nate Marquardt, because at that time, Nate Marquardt was on fire. He did lose to Damian Maia, I remember that. But then he, had his match with Anderson Silva where he almost won. And you all remember, the funny thing where it's like, yeah, he only won the round, he did win the match. He just won the 5th round. That was funny. Of course, Chael knew that Anderson Silva was the winner, but, it was funny, you have to admit. But, just definitely brought a whole new thing to MMA. Chael would be great in pro wrestling, and pro wrestlers know this, and they've approached Chael and have tried to get Chael to do it. At this point, I don't think he wants to. At one point, Chael actually did want to be a pro wrestler, and he actually went to the WCW power plant back in, I want to say, early 2000s or late 90s, back when, if you used to watch WCW back in the 90s, they used to advertise commercials, for the WCW power plant. So if you wanted to try out to be a wrestler, you could come on down. Chael did it and actually made it very far, but then WCW folded around that time. So he was never able to wrestle. And, who knows what would have happened there had that transpired, because certainly with the whole Anderson Silva thing, Chael knew how to promote that fight, knew how to promote it really well, knew how to sell the fight. A lot of people, and even a little bit myself, were kind of like, what is with this guy? But then, you realize that Chael's just selling the fight, with Anderson Silva, for example. He was just selling that fight, and he knew how to do it. And he knew how to do it pretty much better than anybody, I would say, in MMA. So, be interesting to see how far Chael makes it in this tournament. Could he beat a Frank Mir? That's an interesting matchup. Stylistically, it certainly is. I mean, it is the great wrestler versus great jiu-jitsu guy. Both are great boxers. But, who knows what would happen? I mean, I would tend to think that Frank Mir would be the bigger person in that match. But there again, would it matter? If Chael comes in more agile and is the more agile, faster guy, he might win. Because, you got to remember, Mike Tyson in his prime, he was 220 pounds. And he was beating, the biggest guys in his division. So, it'd be interesting to see how all this plays out. Because, Chael is fighting at heavyweight. First time at heavyweight in this tournament. So he doesn't have to make a weight cut at all. His natural weight is about 220. So, we'll see what happens. There's some other interesting fights in this Bellator tournament, too. You also have Matt Mitrione against Roy Nelson. Both guys were on The Ultimate Fighter, of course, with Brandon Schwab. Brandon Schwab, is actually right now having a pretty successful career as a stand-up comedian. Fighter and the Kid is a good podcast. If you haven't listened to it, it's a podcast kind of like in the buddy genre with Brian Callen and Brandon Schwab. So, if you like things that are in the buddy genre, because there's not a whole lot of buddy genre things anymore, right? Used to always have, like, buddy genre kind of stuff. But, I don't know, now that thing has sort of died out a bit. You don't really see as much of it anymore. So, yeah, it's in the buddy genre style. But, yeah, who knows who will win that? Roy Nelson definitely knocking a lot of people out. People always talk about his physique and the way he looks and all that. But, he just proves fighting is not a bodybuilding competition, right? I mean, it's not. But, so yeah, Fedor, Matt Mitrione. I'm trying to think, what's another? Ryan Bader and King Mo. That's another one on this card. That'll be an interesting matchup as well. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see who will win. Because all these fighters, if you followed the UFC in recent years, you'd be familiar of probably all these fighters. Maybe not King Mo, but you'd be familiar of all these fighters if you followed the UFC in recent years. Because these guys were most recently big UFC stars, except Fedor. Fedor was never in the UFC. But I remember when they tried to get him in, and, unfortunately, that never happened. But, yeah, it should be interesting to see who wins this. I mean, I want to say, I hope Chael wins the whole thing. I could be wrong. I don't think Fedor will win it. Like I said, Fedor was my favorite fighter, one of my favorite fighters at one point. But, unfortunately, I just don't think that at this stage in his career, he would be able to beat some of these guys. I mean, he already did lose to Matt Mitrione. So, yeah, at this point, I don't see him winning it. I wish he would win it, but I just don't see that happening at this point. Maybe Chael will be the winner. I mean, that would be cool, to see Chael finally kind of rising to the occasion and winning. Because, yeah, like I just said earlier in this video, that, his more recent wins have been against some, major stars, Vanderlei Silva and Rampage. And, he did lose to Tito Ortiz before that, but you could make the argument that those are like the two biggest wins of his career. I mean, before then, he did beat Michael Bisping. That was a big win. He did beat, like I said, Nate Marquardt, when Nate Marquardt was really tearing through the division. He did defeat Brian Stann. I remember that. I don't really know. I guess Brian Stann might have been a top contender at one point. Who else did he? He beat some other big names. I think he beat Shogun, I want to say. Yeah, he beat Shogun. I know he fought Forrest Griffin early on in his career. I had forgotten who won that. I think Forrest Griffin might have won, although, don't take my word on that one. It was a while back. But, yeah, this tournament definitely, interesting to check out. So, I'm, interesting to see who wins this. But, yeah, because, these guys were stars. To me, from what I heard, I think Shane Corwin actually wanted to be a part of this tournament. And apparently, I don't know, for some reason, they wouldn't let him in. I don't know what all the details were about that. But yeah, Shane Corwin would be a good contender in this. To me, he actually should be in it. Shane Corwin was kind of like the Francis Ngannou at one point. He's the guy knocking everyone out in the first round. People are like, who's going to beat this guy? Of course, he then ended up losing to Brock Lesnar and then lost some, another match after that. He had a lot of injuries. But, yeah, it would be interesting to see, how well he would do, because he was very good. He did beat, like Frank Mir, and definitely was a good fighter at one point. So, is he still? Possibly. But, Yeah, so just kind of wanted to talk about, give my 2 cents, if you will, on this Bellator tournament. That's all I've got. You know, as always, as I always say in these videos, if you've watched this video, I thank you for watching. Have a great night. As you can see, since I've been doing this video, it's been getting darker and darker. So, all right, have a good night. Thanks for watching.